love that. So in the just the the multiple impacts that fantasy and sci-fi had on you, talk to me about the impact then transforming into I really want to create this space in something that's uniquely and truly mine that I'm now writing.
That's so wild because I did know I wanted to be a writer. I did not connect the dots between what I was reading and what I wanted to write until I got into university, and I had already written mostly nonfiction, spiritual reflection stuff, devotional material, maybe some stuff that was more theological because that was my faith tradition, and there was a lot of opportunities to write in that tradition. But then one day, when I was kind of minding my own business, doing some of that thought work that I mentioned earlier, this character just popped into my head. Gideon just walked in to my mental space, and it was an accosting moment because, like I mentioned, I wasn't thinking about writing anything fictional, but this fictional character showed up in my imagination, and I was trying to figure out, like, why are you, like, what is this and why are you here? And over the course of a short amount of time, I began to get the sense that this character, Gideon, wanted me to write his story. And so that's how it started. And then, right about the same time that that was happening, I was studying the book of Proverbs, which is a book in the Old Testament. My faith tradition, is big in that. So I was studying that book, and I was learning about, in that book, it talks a lot about the power of words and how there's this one verse in there, one passage that says the power of life and death are in the tongue, and those who love it eat its fruit. And this is actually quoted in the first book in Gideon's Dawn before the book starts, because that phrase, that just line blew me away. This notion, if that's true, that the power of life and death are in the tongue. Just blew my mind. Like, you could kill with your tongue, you can give life with your tongue.
Wild.
Yeah, and so I began to put these two things together and imagine, what if there what if there was a world where words could literally kill, or literally give life, and Gideon somehow had an adventure or had a journey to take in that space. And those were the seeds that began the story of Gideon's dawn. So really, I came into writing my own narrative by sort of being confronted with this character and this idea, and then the two coming together and saying, "Yeah, there's something here that you need to write about," you know. And then he just uh, honestly wouldn't leave me alone. So I just so I kept just kept writing stuff about him, and then the story kind of began to unfold from there. And I
Wow.
started writing it in earnest right about the time I graduated, yeah, from university.
Okay. So that's when you start. So obviously the character came before the story. And then as you, I guess I would say, walked with the character, the story began to expand.
Yeah. I just started to do it on the side. I When I got out of university, I was working in a church at first, and then a few years into that, I got a job at a publishing house. I was trained, like I mentioned, I wanted to be a writer, so I was trained as a writer. So I got a job at a publishing house as an editor. So I had a full-time gig working with words, but my job did not involve working in fiction. So I continued to work on this novel project as a just a side hobby, and wrote Gideon's Dawn over a period of that, I guess, a couple of years. Um, and didn't know, I really didn't have a sense at the time of, like, what I'm going to do with this. I just was like, well, I'm just going to write this story and then see where it goes. Because even though I was in the publishing world, I was in the nonfiction publishing world, so I didn't have those two parts of the publishing realm don't usually mix that much. So I didn't have a lot of access to the agents and the editors that work in the fiction realm. Um, but yeah, I got that done in that time, and then uh, I told a fellow editor friend of mine that I was working on this. And at the time, he was freelancing for a publishing house called Barber Publishing, and he asked me to send him the proposal that I had created because I had already begun to send out proposals to various publishing houses for Gideon's Dawn, and I sent it to him thinking he might submit it to his publishing house and maybe I'd get a good word in. Little did I know that he had authority. He was contracted to actually acquire books. So he just accepted it.
Wow.
So so I ended up getting Gideon's Dawn published way before I ever expected to. And then Waymaker got contracted pretty soon after that too. So I kind of found myself getting pulled into this before I even knew exactly what I was doing. I just sort of like was, oh, I've got this book almost finished, and a second book now I've been contracted for, and apparently this story is going to happen. So yeah, that's how it got going.
I love it. Okay, so let's use this as a jumping off point to segue kind of into the Pearlsong Refounding. And I'm aware of this just because I'm privy to the information, but I'm sure something our readers might not be aware of is that the first and second book were created before the second two in the series, the
Right.
tetralogy. Would you speak to a little bit about that? Like, so you created it, got picked up, you were contracted for the second book, wrote that, and then there's actually quite a big gap.
Yes.
What was the reason behind that?
Yeah, it's interesting because you kind of see this unfold in the story a bit as well. So I think there's both a logistical reason, there's a pretty clear logistical reason why it happened, but I now in hindsight think there was also a creative reason why it happened. But for the logistic reason was that I was contracted to do the second book the first book gets released. I'm starting to work on the second book, and right at that time, my father fell very ill and very quickly declined and then passed away. And then I had to, or chose to, relocate my life back to the town I grew up in order to take care of my mom, who is now in great need of support. And so I became a primary caregiver, and no one in the family knew this would happen, but as soon as my father passed, my mother seriously declined. So that became pretty much not quite a full-time job, but very, very close to that. So I was all I could do for many months, if not a couple of years, actually probably several years, to care for her and then make enough money on the side just to support myself. And I just didn't have any space to do any writing. So the second book had to wait. I still worked on it, but it just was very, very slow. Um, and so it kind of just fell to the side to the point that the publishing company that I had contracted with, uh, through no fault of theirs, they were very gracious through the whole experience, but eventually said, "Look, we can't hold on to this contract. We understand you're in a very difficult situation, but we have to move on." And so that we canceled the contract, and I got the rights back for Waymaker. Um, so it was very deflating for me, very hard for me, but at the same time, I was dealing with a family crisis that I didn't feel like I had any other option
Yeah.
around. So that led to the kind of the dream dying. And
Mhm.
I did finish Waymaker eventually, and then I republished both Gideon's Dawn and Waymaker under my own label. Um, but by
This is
that,
in another season
yeah,
of life.
this was like 2 or 3 or 4 years later. Like I'm now still acting as a caregiver for my mom. I'm still trying to make a living, just making ends meet, and then doing this on the side. But the momentum had already been lost. So I was more or less just doing it as a kind of a gift to myself. I didn't really expect the books to be recognized or grow. It felt like the death of a dream, to be honest, to get into that space, to be in that spot. But then I just kept going. Like once those two books were out, I kept working on book three, and then eventually book four. But they were so slow, and it was always on the side, and I wasn't ever sure, is this worth it or not? Because it just felt like life came in and just dropped a bomb on the whole process.
Yeah.
However, what eventually did happen is that I got to a point in life where where I was no longer caregiving my mom. She ended up passing away, and then I moved back to where I was living and got reestablished, got stable, and then thought, okay, now this is the chance for me to actually finish the story. And what I found as I started to work on books three and four, that um, this is where the other reason comes in. I think the creative reason why it took so long is that I'm not sure that I could have written books three and four when I was 24 years old or 25 years old. Like
Yeah.
the way the story unfolds and what happens to the characters and the journey they go on, I think I had to go on quite a journey and grow and change and take some hard knocks in order to be the kind of writer that could actually write these second two books, to be faithful to the characters and to their journey. So in hindsight, it feels like it kind of worked out just the way it needed
Yeah.
to, because I feel much better about the way the story went. I feel like I have the life experience to be able to write what is now written in those books
Yeah.
that I don't think I would have if I'd really finished them back when I was in my 20s.